Have you ever felt that persistent sensation that you're wasting your life? No matter how much you try to keep busy with people, goals, and obligations, deep down it feels like something essential is missing, as if you're just existing, not truly living. Maybe you've interpreted this as anxiety. A doctor might have called it depression and prescribed something to silence that discomfort. A pill in the morning, another at night, while time passes, numbing what you urgently need to hear. But what if I told you that this suffering isn't a mistake? What if I said it shouldn't be suppressed, but seen as a call? Carl Gustav Jung, a pioneer of depth psychology, believed that what we call mental disorder is often not pathological. It's the psyche trying to heal itself, a warning that life as it is now isn't serving your soul. Perhaps you are living an imposed routine, an exhausting job, relationships that drain your energy, dreams that aren't yours. Meanwhile, your essence cries out for freedom, but nobody taught you to listen to that cry. On the contrary, you were taught to silence it, to function, to adapt, not to disturb. So you become ill in silence while the world applauds your productivity. This is where Jung comes in. For him, healing doesn't come from denial, but from diving in. It's not about masking symptoms, but understanding what they are saying. Jung said that neurosis is a substitute for legitimate suffering. We get sick because we run from the pain we need to face to transform our lives. As long as we continue to flee, the suffering persists. This video is not for those seeking distraction. It's for those who are tired of pretending, for those who feel they're sinking but have a spark of hope that there is an existing path, and there is. It starts with the decision to stop running away and start listening. Listening to yourself, the unconscious, the pain you silenced with medication, addictions, routines. By now, you might understand that the emptiness you feel isn't weakness. It's the absence of yourself in your life. It's time to change. You've felt sadness for days, weeks, maybe months. You go to the doctor. He listens for a few minutes. You talk about insomnia, anxiety, chest tightness, a sense of disconnection. He nods, types something, and diagnoses anxiety, prescribes medication. In a few days or weeks, your pain becomes a simple chemical imbalance. An existential scream turns into a number on a prescription. What nobody tells you is that this treatment doesn't focus on the soul. It focuses on functionality. You need to keep working, producing, keeping the system running. The medication allows you to endure the unsustainable, offered as a definitive solution. But, as Jung warned, this solution is a trap. Jung believed that many modern neuroses don't come from brain failures, but from the disconnection between the life lived and the life that should be lived. Ignoring vocations, authentic impulses, and internal truths makes the soul sick. It expresses itself through the body and mind. Anxiety, panic, hopelessness. Instead of listening, we are trained to silence. We neutralize discomfort with chemicals, return to normal. But what is normal? A job you hate but can't leave. Superficial relationships to maintain appearances, empty goals, automatic routines, and a feeling of just surviving. The anxiety you feel is not a failure. It's your soul saying, "This life is not yours. You are betraying me." If you ignore this for too long, the body will scream louder. But the system always offers a new dose, a new label, a new sedative. The more you adapt, the more you distance yourself from yourself until you feel neither pain nor pleasure, just chronic numbness called adult life. Carl Jung warned that by medicating symptoms without understanding their roots, we create a false sense of healing. The person seems better on the outside, but continues to be lost on the inside. In the long run, this division between feeling and living causes an even greater collapse. Because you can't run from the soul forever, it will demand its price. Whether through burnout, emotional collapses, or a void that nothing fills. This mass medicalization reflects something deeper. A culture that doesn't know how to deal with suffering and fears pain for having lost the notion of its transformative value. For Jung, suffering was necessary. It was the beginning of a journey. It was the call to individuation. But in modern society, any discomfort is labeled as pathological, and by fleeing from suffering, we also lose the chance to become who we should be. The question that remains is how many lives are silenced by treatments that merely camouflage the problem? How many existences are wasted for the sake of artificial stability? How many journeys are interrupted before they even begin? To start answering, we need to look at what lies behind the modern emotional collapse. This takes us to the next point: the environment we live in, the cultural structures that shape our identity, and the lifestyle that is often the true disease. Perhaps the problem has never been you, but the world that taught you to hate yourself. Let's talk more about this in the next part. If you're not yet subscribed, subscribe and follow our videos. Thank you for your help. Let's continue. Have you ever wondered why so many people suffer emotionally, even surrounded by material comfort, technology, and supposed freedoms? We've never had so much access to information, entertainment, and stimuli, and at the same time, we've never been so distant from ourselves. The root of modern psychological suffering is not just in the mind, but in the environment that shapes us from an early age. Carl Jung understood this clearly and incisively. For him, the problem wasn't just individual, but cultural and structural. We live in a society that values appearance and neglects essence, that rewards efficiency and ignores the soul. From an early age, we are led to follow a script: study, choose a safe career, be productive, consume, smile for photos, and hide any vulnerability. We grow up learning to please, compete, and win. But nobody teaches us to listen to our intuition, understand our feelings, or question what really gives meaning to life. This absence of meaning is not casual, it's programmed. We learn to believe that our identity comes from the outside, from the title we have, from the salary we earn, from the approval we receive. Jung knew this was a fatal trap. When self-worth depends on external standards, we become exposed to frustration and we move away from our internal nature, from the unconscious, from the soul. And that's where the void sets in. Slowly and silently, it dominates our routine. We meet all expectations, tick all the boxes, but still feel out of place. We live someone else's life, feeling something is wrong, but not knowing what. What we feel isn't weakness. It's disconnection. Disconnection from what is true, spontaneous, and instinctive. According to Jung, this disconnection fuels deeper psychological disorders. But society doesn't want you to realize this because disconnected people are easier to control. They consume more, question less, and follow orders without resistance. They are useful, docile, and predictable. When they finally collapse, hit by anxiety, depression, or burnout, the system offers only palliatives, never the truth. Jung said that to heal the individual, it's necessary to confront the world that hurt them. It's essential to understand how we were conditioned, what we repressed, and what we sacrificed in the name of acceptance. This task is painful because it involves admitting that you lived a life that wasn't truly yours, that you molded yourself to fit standards that suffocated you, that you were domesticated by a culture that fears true human essence. But recognizing the origin of the void is the only way to fill it with truth. This journey is called individuation. It's a profound and transformative process that Jung believed to be the true path to healing. In the next part, we will explore this journey. What does it mean to individuate? How to integrate the forgotten parts of yourself and build a life of meaning? The answer requires courage and surrender. Let's move forward. There comes a point in life when the pain becomes unbearable, when the social mask becomes too heavy, when we realize that we've been living as though we were only half, or worse, a caricature of ourselves. It's at this breaking point that, according to Carl Jung, the most important journey one can undertake begins, the journey of individuation. But what does it really mean to individuate? Jung wasn't referring to easy solutions or small changes. He was talking about a deep, almost mythical process where we stop being mere reflections of the external world, family, and cultural expectations, and start being who we truly are. In essence, individuation is the path to psychic wholeness. It's the moment when you stop being what others expect and start following the call of your own soul. This process isn't linear or comfortable, quite the opposite. It requires confronting everything that has been repressed, ignored, or denied. What Jung called the personal unconscious begins to reveal itself. Unresolved traumas, suffocated desires, inherited beliefs never questioned. Individuation starts when we decide to stop running from these parts and try to integrate them. But that's only the beginning. The most challenging and perhaps most painful step of individuation is encountering the shadow, the dark, instinctive, chaotic side that we hide. It's the unexpressed anger, the envy we pretend not to feel, the impulses that embarrass us. Jung said, "Those who look outside dream. Those who look inside awaken." Looking inside means confronting the shadow without masks, without excuses, without moral judgment. Why is this crucial? Because the shadow, if ignored, controls us without our realizing it. When integrated, the shadow transforms into a source of power, authenticity, and vital energy. You can only truly live when you stop fighting against yourself and reconcile with everything that inhabits you. Individuation is this: rebuilding internal unity, reconnecting with the self, the regulating center of the psyche, the living totality that you are in potential. Here's the great irony. While the world insists you need to improve, Jung said you need to become whole, not more perfect, but real, not more suitable, but free. True healing is not in fitting better into the world, but in aligning your inner world with the truth of your being. This process can be solitary and arduous, but it is the only one that offers real meaning to existence. Because living from your center changes everything. Your choices, your relationships, your way of suffering. Suffering ceases to be a punishment and becomes part of a deeper transformation. But an inevitable question arises. Why do so many people shy away from this journey? Why do they remain anesthetized, repeating patterns, avoiding confrontation with their own souls? The answer lies at the root of modern suffering. The absence of meaning, a silent epidemic that corrodes from within even those who seem well. This is what we'll talk about in the next part. Maybe your pain is not a problem, but a symptom of a deeper truth. Your life hasn't yet had a clear purpose, but that can and should change. Look around you. How many people do you know who seem to just exist, not live? Who follow an automatic routine full of empty commitments, superficial distractions, and immense fatigue? Jung knew this suffering wasn't accidental, it was structural, existential. For him, much of modern man's suffering comes from a brutal realization. Life has lost its meaning. We're not talking about a great cosmic mission, but personal purpose, alignment between what one does and who one is. Living according to an internal truth and not under the demands of a world that idolizes success but wounds the soul. Jung realized that the deeper symptoms, like anxiety and depression, often disappeared when people found meaning in their lives. Not when they took medication or made money, but when they found a why. Because, deep down, you can endure almost any pain if you know why you are living. Without this sense, even the greatest pleasures become banal. Even the most ambitious goals can seem empty. This reflects the epidemic of emptiness we face today. People exhausted, not only by the burden of tasks, but by the lack of purpose. Lives full of commitments, but poor in significant direction. Jung understood that we need to feel that we are part of something greater. We need to believe that our existence has weight and meaning. Without this, we collapse internally. Suffering becomes disorientation. The soul seeks a path, but the world offers distractions, likes, series, self-help, productivity techniques, miraculous courses. Try to fill a void that only truth can complete. The truth is that many live a life they didn't choose. They were pushed down paths that please others but betray themselves. They chose careers disconnected from their values. They maintain relationships that weaken them. They live in places that suffocate them. They repeat routines that wear them out. And the body feels this. The mind collapses. The soul withdraws. There is no remedy for lack of meaning. What is missing is not serotonin. It's direction. It's not dopamine. It's identity. That's why Jung's depth psychology is so urgent, because he wanted people to live authentically, with the courage to declare, "This life is not for me and I will not continue this way." But how to do this? How to begin to rebuild meaning when everything seems designed to distract you from the essence? Jung offered an answer. Reconnecting with the unconscious. There, in the forgotten parts, lies the key to your purpose. We will explore this in the next part. How the unconscious, far from being a repository of traumas, can become your ally in healing. What you avoid facing may be what you need to discover to live meaningfully. Most people want to heal, but few are willing to face the necessary challenge. Contrary to what conventions say, true transformation does not start with positive affirmations or the creation of new habits. It begins with a confrontation, a dive into the depths of one's own soul. Carl Jung taught us exactly this. There is no healing without contact with the unconscious. But what is this unconscious? For Jung, it wasn't just a repository of repressed memories or past traumas. It was a vast symbolic universe that holds all the parts of us that have been forgotten, denied, and abandoned. Our most authentic impulses, our deepest fears, our most painful truths. Everything you've tried to ignore is there, waiting. And why does this matter? Because what you don't face in the unconscious comes to govern your life without you realizing it. Jung stated clearly, what you do not bring to consciousness returns as fate. You think you have bad luck in love, but unconsciously you repeat the same patterns. You believe you're sabotaged at work, but deep down you fear success. You think you're a victim of the world, but in reality you're being controlled by unaddressed traumas. The unconscious is like a dark mirror. It reflects who you are, not who you'd like to be. It's frightening because it reveals painful truths and exposes the masks you've created to survive. It demands you abandon the illusion of control and embrace internal complexity. But precisely in this confrontation lies healing. The more you deny the unconscious, the more it dominates you. More reactive, impulsive, and fragmented you become. However, the more you integrate it, the more whole you become. Jung called this the expansion of consciousness. It only happens when you stop running and start listening. But how to do this? Through dreams, symbols, art, silence, meditation, analysis. The unconscious doesn't speak with logic. It communicates with images, sensations, and emotions that seem to come out of nowhere, but it's not nothing. It's you. It's the part of you that was locked away, waiting to be recognized. And when you start to listen to this part, something changes. You begin to see yourself more clearly, understanding your decisions, embracing your wounds, and above all, reclaiming your power. Not knowing what resides within you, you become a hostage to others, to the past, to expectations, and to culture. But by courageously diving into the unconscious, you begin to free yourself. You understand that the anxiety that paralyzes you isn't an enemy, but a message. That the sadness that visits you isn't weakness, but a sign that something needs to die for something new to emerge. This process is demanding. It requires time, patience, and depth, and it asks you to abandon the comfort of the surface. But it is the only path to authenticity. And it is from this authenticity that you can rebuild your life, no longer as a hostage to the unconscious, but as a conscious creator of your own destiny. Now that you understand the role of the unconscious in pain and transformation, one last question must be asked. What is stopping you from starting this journey? Why, even aware of this, do so many remain paralyzed, living on autopilot and repeating meaningless lives? The answer lies in fear, fear of change, of the unknown, of abandoning the familiar, even if it is harmful. In the next part, we'll talk about this fear and the most challenging and liberating choice you'll need to make to stop wasting your life. Because, in the end, either you live anesthetized or you awaken. There is no middle ground. The time will come to make a choice. Not just any choice, but the choice. The one that separates who you are from who you were conditioned to be. That defines whether you will continue living a borrowed, empty life or commit to the most serious promise to yourself, the commitment to your own soul. If you've come this far, it's not by accident. Something inside you is awakening. It might still be a whisper or could already be screaming, but it's there. This call won't disappear, as it comes from the most profound and honest part of who you are. The part that refuses to accept that life is just work, obligations, distractions, and survival. The part of you that knows, even inexplicably, that there is something greater waiting for you. But it will only be revealed if you have the courage to move toward yourself. Carl Jung said that the greatest privilege of life is to become who you truly are. He also knew this is the most avoided path because it demands that you abandon everything that is comfortable, predictable, and superficial. It requires facing deep fears, confronting your shadows, and questioning everything you've been taught as truth. This is exactly why this path is sacred. Because it transforms, because it truly heals. Most will continue on autopilot, preferring numbness to clarity. They will accumulate possessions, distractions, and likes, while inside they silently decay. But you don't need to be just another statistic. You can choose. Choose to stop wasting your existence. Choose to come out of anesthesia. Choose to build a life that makes sense, a life that is truly yours. I'm not saying it will be easy. It won't be. It will hurt. It will confuse. It will require breaking away. But it will also bring liberation. And there is nothing more powerful than an awakened soul. When you start living according to who you truly are, you become unshakable. You stop asking for permission, stop comparing yourself, and stop losing yourself trying to please those who will never understand you. So, I ask, what do you need to let go of to start truly living? What is the lie you still tell yourself? Comment below. It doesn't matter if it's a phrase, a confession, or a question. The simple act of writing is already a step toward leaving the anesthesia, a gesture of presence, of choice, of awakening. And if this video moved you, if any part touched a wound or ignited a spark, you need to see the next video. Not because it's a continuation, but because of its importance. If you've come this far, you're ready to go even deeper. Now, more than ever, it's time to continue. You feel that something is out of place, but you can't identify exactly what it is. You wake up every day feeling like you're living a life that doesn't belong to you. Perhaps you've already tried everything: therapy, self-help books, advice from friends. But the emptiness persists, an uncomfortable feeling of being on the wrong path, a path that doesn't represent you. And do you know why this happens? Because maybe you really are deviating from who you truly are. This doesn't mean you're broken, but that you've moved away from your true essence. Carl Gustav Jung, one of the greatest scholars of the human psyche, said that we are all born with an internal map. He called this the soul map, a deep guide that directs us to our true nature. However, there is an obstacle. Almost no one learns to interpret it. We've been taught from an early age to follow other people's maps, those of society, family, culture. Without realizing it, we begin to follow paths that take us away from who we really are. We choose paths that don't reflect our essence. We're in relationships that drain us. We wear masks to fit in where we shouldn't be. Over time, this dissonance transforms into pain, anguish, and apathy. The soul map isn't just a poetic metaphor, it's real. Jung dedicated his life to exploring it, mapping the territories of the psyche, the archetypes, the unconscious, the shadow, the self. His discovery was both frightening and liberating. Much of our suffering doesn't come from chance, but from ignoring this map, from living to please the external instead of following the calls of our soul. If you feel lost, adrift, even when you strive to move forward, this video is for you. Here, I won't offer a magic formula. I'll provide you with something more valuable, a return to what you already carry within yourself. The truth is that your soul has been trying to communicate for a long time. Through dreams, crises, and uncomfortable silences. You just haven't learned to listen. Jung believed that feelings of emptiness, failure, and confusion are, in fact, invitations. Invitations to begin the most meaningful journey of your life. The journey of individuation, of reconnecting with who you truly are. So, if you're tired of feeling inadequate, exhausted from pretending you're fine when inside you're in pieces, remember, you're not alone, nor are you broken. Your suffering is not a defect. It's a sign, a calling. And if you have the courage to respond, to delve deeper and face your inner unknown, you'll discover that what seemed like weakness was just a detour. That the darkness was the prelude to your own light. This video is an invitation. A map in the right hands can change your life. The question is, are you willing to reveal it? Imagine that within you there exists a vast, mysterious territory, filled with symbolic forests, emotional abysses, mountains of forgotten wisdom, and underground rivers of desire and fear. This territory can be explored, understood, and mapped. This is what Jung offers us with his theory of the soul map, a true cartography of the human psyche, built not with compasses and satellites, but with dreams, myths, symbols, and human suffering. For Jung, the soul map is not linear, rational, or logical. It's a set of living symbols that emerge from the depths of the unconscious. Contrary to what we've been taught, the psyche is not just a collection of random thoughts. It is structured. It has a center, the self, a social facade, the persona, a field of hidden conflicts, the shadow, and internal figures that represent the feminine and masculine, anima and animus. From the tension between these forces arise our dilemmas, traumas, dreams, and yearnings. The ego, what you think you are, is just the starting point. It believes it's in control, but in reality, it's like a lost traveler in a forest without a map or compass. Many feel lost because they try to decide based on a superficial self, disconnected from the totality of the psyche, without understanding that there are much deeper forces behind each choice, blockage, and impulse. Jung discovered this by exploring his own dreams and visions, diving into an intensive process of self-analysis. In this dive, he began to recognize recurring symbolic patterns, universal images that appeared both in his own dreams and in those of his patients, and which also appeared in mythologies, religions, fairy tales, and art. Jung called them archetypes, the fundamental elements of the soul map. They act as ancestral landmarks, indicating key points in the human journey: birth, death, love, loss, rebirth. We all travel this path in a unique way, but always passing through the same portals. Most importantly, this map is not just for understanding, it's for transformation. Through individuation, the central journey in Jungian psychology, we are called to stop being just a reactive and limited ego, to become an integrated self, someone who lives authentically, aligned with their deepest essence. This process is not easy. It involves confronting the shadow, detaching from the persona, and facing the unconscious. But it's the path to a meaningful life. Ignoring this map transforms life into a succession of mistakes, repetitions, and frustrations. When we begin to understand it, even in a fragmented way, we realize that each symptom, crisis, and pain is an internal message. The soul doesn't shout, it whispers. And those who don't hear the whispers of the soul end up hearing the screams of the body. Anxiety, depression, loss of meaning. Now that you understand what this map is, perhaps you wonder where exactly you are on it. How do you know if you're on the right path, or if you're getting lost? That's what we'll talk about in the next part. The anatomy of the soul, according to Jung, and how to recognize the signs that you're off your path. If the soul has a map, it also has a structure. Understanding this structure is fundamental, not only to locate yourself, but also to understand why you are where you are. Jung compared the psyche to a house with many rooms, levels, and secret corridors. Most people live confined to just one of these rooms, the ego. Ignoring the deep forces is like trying to navigate the ocean by looking only at the surface. Let's start where everyone starts, the ego. It is the center of your consciousness, the self you think you are. It's necessary, but limited. The ego organizes the perception of reality, but it's only a small part of your soul. Surrounded by forces it doesn't control. Below it is the personal unconscious, where repressed memories, unresolved traumas, and denied desires reside. There reside the complexes, emotional causes that control behaviors without you realizing it. Have you ever felt that you make the same mistakes repeatedly? Always attract the same type of relationship? Or run away from something you can't define? That's the personal unconscious acting. But Jung went further, identifying a deeper universal layer shared by all, the collective unconscious. It's in this layer that the archetypes reside, primordial images that shape our life experience. Regardless of your origin or era, we all carry these archetypal figures: the hero, the mother, the wise old man, the child, the rebel, the lover. These archetypes are not just symbols. They are living forces that influence our desires, choices, fears, and impulses. Between the ego and the self, which is the organizing nucleus of the psychic totality, there are three fundamental structures that influence how we relate to the world and to ourselves: persona, shadow, and the archetypes of the opposite sex, anima and animus. The persona is the social mask used to adapt and survive. It's the role you play to be accepted, like the exemplary child, the competent professional, or the ideal partner. Useful, but dangerous. Because the more you identify with this mask, the more you move away from your essence. The persona is like a garment for the soul to go out in public, but it should not be confused with your true identity. The shadow, on the other hand, is the opposite. It represents everything you hide, reject, or deny in yourself: flaws, unacceptable desires, anger, envy, jealousy, shame. But the shadow also contains hidden potentials, repressed talents, unrecognized strength, stifled creativity. Facing the shadow is painful, but essential, because what you don't integrate dominates you. Everything you don't accept in yourself, you project onto others. What you hate in others is often what you can't bear to admit in yourself. And then we have anima and animus, the internal figures of the opposite sex within each of us. For men, the anima represents the internal feminine principle: sensitivity, intuition, receptivity, connection with the unconscious. For women, the animus represents the internal masculine principle: reason, action, firmness, direction. These figures don't refer to gender, but to psychic polarities. Ignored, they manifest in distorted ways. In toxic relationships, destructive idealizations, or emotional rigidity. Integrated, they become bridges to the self, paving the way for a more complete, highest, balanced, and creative psyche. Finally, at the deepest center of the soul, we find the self, the true you, not what you think you are, but what you are in essence. The self is totality, integration, balance. It's the inner voice that calls you to evolution, individuation, and a reconnection with your deepest truth. When you live far from the self, you feel scattered, exhausted, and empty. When you approach it, you discover meaning, purpose, and direction. The modern tragedy is that we've been trained to prioritize the exterior and ignore these inner truths. We are educated to please, compete, and show, not to feel, integrate, and understand. This causes many to live in conflict, trapped in fragile personas, fleeing from the shadow and disconnected from the self. Without recognizing anima and animus in relationships, with the understanding of the structure of your soul, the question arises: what happens when all this is ignored? What occurs when living only as an ego, shaped by the persona, without listening to the self? This will be addressed in the next part. The modern errors. How society pushes us toward routes that take us away from the soul, deteriorating our essence. If this content made sense to you, subscribe to the channel for more reflections. Have you ever wondered why so many today live anxious, depressed, and exhausted, even with apparent success? Why do people who have everything feel empty? According to Jung, this happens because most don't live authentically, but borrowed. We follow scripts not written by us, pursue goals without questioning them, and lose ourselves in identities we didn't choose. Modern society values appearance, performance, and productivity. From a young age, we're taught to compete, win, please. They tell us who we should be, what to desire, how to act. We then create a socially accepted persona, increasingly distant from the self. We become experts at performing, but amateurs in the art of living fully. It begins in childhood, when we learn that feeling is weakness, making mistakes is unacceptable, and showing vulnerability is dangerous. We repress the shadow to avoid rejection, hide creative impulses fearing judgment, replacing our desires with external expectations. Thus, gradually, we move away from our center. When we realize it, we don't know who we are, only who we've learned to be. In adulthood, the deviation intensifies. The pressure to adjust to the model of success is overwhelming. Solid career, stable relationship, social status, perfect appearance. The soul is forgotten, but the self doesn't disappear. It just screams. And its screams are symptoms: anxiety, existential crises, addictions, psychosomatic illnesses, empty relationships, a fatigue that rest doesn't resolve. Jung saw these manifestations not as failures, but as alerts from the soul, indicating that we live far from our center and our truth. We live in a culture that idolizes extroversion, but not everyone was born to be seen. Some were born to see, create, heal, for silence and observation. By standardizing life ideals, modern culture transforms unique talents into apparent defects. The introspective is shy, the sensitive fragile, the reflective slow. Entire archetypes are suffocated, the healer ignored, the artist mocked, the mystic ridiculed. Worse, our society doesn't just ignore the unconscious, it fears it. And what it fears It pathologizes. This results in a generation that feels broken for not fitting into a mold that was never suitable. But there is a way out. Jung believed that suffering is the beginning of healing, as it forces us to stop, look inward, and question. At this moment, with courage, we can begin the return to the self, which Jung called individuation. This return begins with a crucial step, recognizing the signs that we are off our path. These symptoms are not failures, but compasses, sensations that, if listened to carefully, indicate the way back to the soul. In the next part, we'll explore what it means to be on the wrong path. What are the invisible signs, the emotional symptoms, the repetitive patterns that indicate you're moving away from your true essence, and how to begin to return? Being on the wrong path isn't just about bad decisions or external consequences. In Jung's profound view, it means living disconnected from your essence, from your internal truth. And this always has a cost. The soul notices when you move away from the center. Even if the mind tries to rationalize or ignore, the signs appear. They first emerge subtly, as restlessness, inexplicable boredom, small discomforts. However, if ignored, the soul begins to scream. These screams are loud enough to paralyze your life. The first symptoms are often emotional, a fatigue that doesn't disappear with rest, anxiety without apparent cause. A persistent sadness appears when everything should be fine. You may have professional success, a stable relationship, an organized routine, and still feel empty, as if something in you is silently dying. It's like watching life from the outside, a spectator. Next come the repetitive patterns, relationships that always end the same way, cycles of self-sabotage, decisions that cancel each other out. You feel like you're walking in circles, trapped in a labyrinth with a map drawn by someone else. This happens because, by moving away from the self, you live under the control of autonomous complexes, emotional fragments that command your psyche and lead you to repeat mistakes, even knowing the result. It's like watching a movie whose ending is known, but impossible to stop watching. Another indication that you're off your path is the feeling of internal falseness. Even while maintaining an appearance of normality, you may feel like you're acting, lying to yourself. Life loses color, passion, meaning. The more you try to distract yourself, keep busy, accelerate, the more evident the inner abyss becomes. Life loses its flavor. Days become repetitive, all because you live outwardly but die inside. And there's something even deeper. When away from the self, dreams change. They become more symbolic, intense, disturbing. The unconscious sends clear messages that something important is being neglected. Jung saw dreams as letters sent by the self, and the greater the distance between you and your center, the more urgent the content becomes. Images of falls, blocked paths, abandoned houses, threatening figures, all are symbolic expressions of a soul trying to guide you back. Sensitivity is needed to interpret and courage to follow. Why does this happen? Because the self, the totality of your soul, seeks for you to become who you truly are. It will not rest until this happens. Jung called this process individuation, which is uncomfortable and challenging, as it requires facing everything that has been repressed. Your shadow, fears, hidden desires, forgotten potentials. Above all, it requires a dive into the unknown, into what you are not yet, but can become. If you feel lost, repeating patterns, emotionally drained, or living a life that doesn't seem like yours, that is the call, not as punishment, but as invitation. You are not being punished, but awakened. This is where the next step of the journey comes in. How to begin walking back to the self. How to use this soul map in practice to rediscover meaning, reconnect with yourself, and transform pain into direction. In the next part, we'll explore the tools and principles that Jung proposed to transform suffering into consciousness and disorientation into clarity. You've already understood that there is a map, that the soul has a structure, that society teaches us to ignore it, and that symptoms are compasses disguised as pain. Now, the question is, how to return, find the way back, leave the surface of the persona, and reach the core of the self. The answer isn't simple, as the journey of individuation is unique for each person. Jung left a set of principles, practices, and symbols as navigation tools. He knew that the return to the center isn't done with logical reasoning or willpower. Because what's at stake isn't a problem to be solved, but a soul to be heard. The first tool is dream observation. Jung emphasized that dreams are manifestations of the unconscious, symbolic messages from the self. They reveal hidden truths, unconscious patterns, repressed desires, and indicate directions. To understand them, one must learn to read the symbolic language. Dreams speak in metaphors, images, atmospheres. A collapsing path may indicate the collapse of a limiting belief. A wild animal chasing you may represent a repressed impulse to be integrated. Each dream is a fragment of your map. The second tool is active imagination, a technique developed by Jung to dialogue with the internal figures of the psyche. It consists of allowing images from the unconscious to manifest in a waking state. Through writing, drawing, visualization, or meditation, active imagination is not fantasy, it is listening. It's placing yourself before the inner unknown with presence and courage. It's opening space for the unconscious to manifest, not as an enemy, but as an ally. An indispensable path is facing the shadow. This implies looking at what you reject in yourself without judgment or escape. It's recognizing dark impulses, resentments, and vulnerabilities that you hide even from yourself. It's also recognizing forgotten talents, suppressed desires, and stifled potentials. The shadow is not something to be fought, but a part of your soul that seeks recognition. Without it, individuation is not possible. Additionally, it's crucial to understand the role of the persona and learn to consciously dismantle it. Identify the masks you wear at work, in relationships, and on social media. Understand why they were built. Having a persona isn't the problem. We all have one. The problem is believing that you are the persona. When you identify with the mask, the self becomes inaccessible. By beginning to dismantle it, the true self begins to emerge. It's equally important to integrate anima and animus. This requires deep inner listening. For men, developing the anima is cultivating sensitivity, intuition, and embracing the unconscious. For women, integrating the animus means accessing deep reason, internal direction, and assertiveness that comes from the center. When these polarities are denied, we project onto others what we lack, generating symbiotic and unbalanced relationships. Integrated, we become complete. Finally, there is an element that permeates this entire journey: inner silence. We live in times of constant noise, but it is in silence that the self manifests. Hurry is the enemy of the soul. Individuation requires pause, presence, solitude, not as escape, but as spiritual practice. Only in silence can you hear yourself without the filter of the world. These practices are not ready-made formulas. They are doors, tools, keys. Each person must find their rhythm, time, and way of walking. The only prerequisite is the willingness to confront yourself in a deep, honest, and radical manner. But there is a common trap for those who begin this journey: the idea that you need to become another person to achieve wholeness. Jung taught the opposite. The goal of individuation is not to become someone new, but to become who you have always been without knowing. This brings us to the deepest part of the journey: integration, the point where the fragmented parts begin to unite and true identity emerges from chaos. In the next part, we'll explore what it means to integrate all these aspects of the psyche. How integration not only heals but liberates. We've reached the crucial point of the journey, integration, where the structure of the soul, the deviations, the symptoms of disconnection, and the tools for return converge to this moment. It's when everything that was separated begins to unite, where the lost pieces of the soul come together, and what was repressed or fragmented finally aligns with who you truly are. But what does it really mean to integrate? It's not eliminating what is uncomfortable or purifying yourself of negative feelings, nor transforming into an idealized version. That is spiritual ego, just another disguised persona. To integrate is to radically accept all parts within you. It's seeing that light and shadow are not enemies, but complementary, that weakness and strength balance each other, that within you coexist the creator and the destroyer, the healer and the wounded, the rebel and the compliant. And only by giving space to all these internal voices can you find your true voice. Jung said that individuation is the process of becoming genuinely who you are. Although it seems simple, this is one of the most challenging tasks of existence, as it requires courage to detach from what is comfortable and abandon identities that have protected you over the years. It's stopping the search outside for what can only be found within. Integration happens when you give up trying to be someone else and surrender to being complete. The journey begins with awareness, when you recognize that you have a persona, but don't confuse yourself with it. When you see your shadow, but don't define yourself by it. When you find anima or animus and learn to listen to them. When you connect to the self not as an idea, but as a living presence. From this point, life ceases to be a battlefield between opposites and transforms into a space for internal dialogue. This causes profound effects. Anxiety begins to diminish, not because you've learned to control it, but because it no longer needs to shout to be heard. Relationships become more sincere, because you don't project onto others what is missing in yourself. Unconscious repetitions dissolve, because now there is someone in command, and that someone is you, complete. To integrate is to heal, but not just in a superficial way. It's healing the internal cracks caused by years of denial and adaptation. It's restoring the bond with your soul. It's living with direction, not as someone seeking a concrete destination, but as someone who knows where they come from. It's converting pain into power, confusion into clarity, and emptiness into fertile ground. Remember, this journey is endless. Integration is not a destination, but a continuous process, a dance between the conscious and the unconscious, between the known and the unknown. With each new cycle of your life, you become more whole, more authentic, more free. If something in this video resonated, if some word spoke directly to your soul, leave a comment. Tell us, what part of the journey are you on? What part of your soul feels like it's trying to come home? Your voice could be the beginning of a journey for someone. If you've made it this far, don't stop. The next video will continue this journey. It's as important as this one. Sometimes, an idea can transform the course of your life. Keep watching. Your soul will thank you.